Hey guys, this is George and I'm back with a new video. So this video was actually requested by a subscriber, Carniel. Thank you for the request and I hope this video answers your question. And so this is actually a follow-up to the Venom 2 video I made way back. And so a lot's happened between now and then, so here's kind of a recap. So since then, some of the major things that have happened is that Fox, they had a huge majority of their assets purchased by Disney. This includes the Marvel properties that Fox had owned. The most well-known ones would be Fantastic Four and the X-Men franchises. So those rights are now with Disney and, of course, by extension, Marvel. The next huge thing that happened is Avengers Endgame. It came out and it is the highest grossing film of all time. It beat Avatar. It united tons of fans. I know there are people who, don't like things about it or just don't like the film. But for the most part, Avengers Endgame came out and it lived up to a lot of people's expectations. It exceeded some people's expectations. Overall, it just did amazing things. And, I just want to say how impressive it was. And I've been watching these movies for a long time. I've been a comic book fan for so long, and I always felt in my heart that comic book movies, before they became what they are now, back when people would still say comic book movies are stupid or, comic books and comic book movies, they just can't be anything serious or anything special. I knew to myself that there were so many great things that people were just missing out on, and I'm so happy that whatever side you fall on with how you felt about Avengers Endgame, I think all of us who are fans of comic books and comic book films can be happy to know that because it became the highest grossing movie of all time, there was some recognition there for the inherent potential of everything that comic book movies could be. And it's had kind of a ripple effect across all industries because now people are looking towards comic book movies. Now you're seeing comic book properties getting greenlit because people are seeing that same potential thanks to movies like Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, and we're about to talk about the Joker next. But I just wanted to say, if you haven't really took in how important Avengers Endgame was to everything, and of course Marvel building up with 10 years of movies up to the single moment, and this unilateral story told over several different films, it's such a huge, momentous thing that I just feel it means so much to a lot of fans and to the industry itself. And so that's why I want to talk a little bit about Avengers Endgame. Another huge thing that happened is that the Joker movie came out and it managed to earn over $1 billion in the box office. This one always blows me away because it's a very dramatic film, so I don't even think of it in the way that I think of any other superhero movie we've had thus far, in my opinion. The trend is to go in the way of the Marvel franchises, as well as kind of what DC's trying to do. They're a little bit different, but they're still in the realm of the superhero movie. But Joker was something else entirely. And so it blows me away that something like the Joker could come out and literally just a movie about a single character. There was no build up to this movie. It wasn't like the Marvel films where they're building up to the Avengers movies. The way I see it, it's basically a one-shot movie that's not supposed to have a sequel. That's not supposed to have a follow-up. That's not even supposed to have like superheroes in it. It's just that, and it's its own thing, and to me it's just amazing what it did on its own. So I did want to give credit where credit's due. So now back to kind of what's going on with Spider-Man. So there was a brief period where fans were in an uproar when it was announced that Disney and Sony had not renewed their agreement to work together on Spider-Man, only for this to be rescinded because they eventually came to a deal, and now we for sure will be getting more Marvel Sony Spider-Man films. And then there's the year 2020. So 2020 has been something else. That's like the nicest way I could put it, just something else. So of course, with the current state of everything in the world, the entertainment industry, particularly film and television, have all had massive setbacks, and they've had delayed releases of films like Black Widow, Wonder Woman 1984. Planned releases for upcoming films have been pushed back into 2021, and it's still unknown if they'll be delayed even further. Venom 2 and Spider-Man 3 is tentatively scheduled for June 25th, 2021 and December 17th, 2022. Those are the tentative release dates for those films. So that's kind of a recap of what's happened since I made that last video way back when. And it all factors into what I think we might see in future films featuring everyone's favorite wall crawler. So most recently, the buzz and rumors I've been seeing relate to Holland's Spider-Man joining Tom Hardy in Venom 2. I tend to take this with a grain of salt because even though both Hardy and Holland and Sony really want this, the guiding force behind the MCU clearly does not feel the same. So when I hear the rumors about Holland on set and Holland set to appear in Venom 2, I tend not to buy into that hype. If you think about it strategically, Venom doesn't fit into the MCU, and Feige runs a pretty tight ship when it comes to the overall direction of the MCU. Examples of this would be when directors like Edgar Wright, Joss Whedon, Patty Jenkins, Ava DuVernay, and others left projects due to creative differences with Marvel, and of course Kevin Feige's overall vision for the projects with what they wanted to do with their films versus what Feige and the executives wanted for the Marvel overall franchise. On a side note, I would have really loved to see Edgar Wright's vision for Ant-Man, and even though I loved Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, I'm still curious to know what the helmer of Avengers 1 and 2 would have done with the third and fourth Avengers film. Anyone else feel that way? Well, I digress, but back to Spider-Man. So that's not to say they can't make it work or that Feige will never allow it. I actually feel like after the negotiations for the continuation of Disney-Sony Spider-Man films, there is a strong chance Sony might have negotiated for this very thing. But until Feige talks about it or even shows more positivity about the prospect of MCU Spider-Man crossing over into Sony's Spider-Verse, I'm not ready to jump on the Spider-Man and Venom 2 bandwagon. Right now, I feel all of the talk of Spidey and Venom 2 is probably just rumors, maybe even originating with Sony in an effort to try to build hype and momentum for something like this, rather than an actual roadmap to this actually happening. With that being said, remember guys, I'm just a guy speculating on things. I have no sources, I just read the same news you have access to and I'm drawing my own conclusions, so don't take this as any sort of gospel. It's just a guy speculating. So something you might be wondering, because it's definitely something I'm wondering, is why is Doctor Strange traveling into the multiverse of madness? I made an in-depth video about this very topic and I kind of touch on Spider-Man just a little bit. So feel free to check that out, but I'll share my thoughts here too. So I personally feel Doctor Strange in the multiverse of madness is the single most important upcoming Phase 4 MCU film that Marvel has planned. So be warned, we're about to talk spoilers for Spider-Man Far From Home. Click off if you want to avoid this or because you haven't seen it. So if you're still here, do you recall in Spider-Man Far From Home, Peter and Mysterio are having a discussion about the multiverse, and Marvel even included this in the trailers promoting the film because one, they knew fans would be salivating that they're introducing parallel realities into the MCU, and two, this is a concept they want general audiences to get familiar with because it's going to play into future films, specifically Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and probably, I think, the Disney Plus What If series. So I think most people were disappointed when it was discovered that the multiverse actually was not confirmed in Far From Home. And Quentin Beck, aka Mysterio, had just fabricated this story to get close to Nick Fury. But the seeds are planted and general audiences are becoming more aware of this concept, which will be fully explored in Doctor Strange 2. Now you might be wondering why I talk so much about Doctor Strange 2 and Spider-Man Far From Home and even mention the What If series. So what I think is that if Feige were on board with Sony and actively working to put Holland's Spider-Man into the Sony Spider-Verse, this is how it's going to happen. So it's apparent that Venom is not in the MCU, nor is any of the Sony's upcoming films like Morbius or the Spider-Woman. But if Feige were to allow the MCU and Sony Spider-Verse to cross paths, it could be with Spider-Man crossing realities into an alternate reality, i.e. the Sony Spider-Verse. This works because it gives Sony what they want by letting Holland appear in their films while giving Feige what he wants by keeping the film universes separate. So what does this mean for Maguire and Garfield appearing in the Spider-Man films? In my original video, I proposed that Sony could really stand to gain from allowing Garfield to reprise the role if he even wanted to. Some of the reasons I mentioned were that it would make it easier for Sony to maintain their own Spider-Man film universe They could release more mature films with an older Garfield portraying an even more mature Spider-Man, and they could easily merge the Garfield Spiderverse with the Venomverse rather than jumping through hoops to include Maguire or Holland's Spider-Mans. With that being said, I feel Sony has made too many public statements about wanting Holland and Venom 2. Even though I'd like to see Holland and Hardy together on screen, I honestly still don't feel like this is the right fit. But this is what Sony wants. This is what producer Amy Pascal wants. This is what the lead actors Hardy and Holland want. So I'm more inclined to think that this is now what's most likely to happen, if it happens at all. But I personally don't want to count out Maguire and Garfield just yet. So remember how I talked a bunch about Doctor Strange 2 and the multiverse being a crucial concept for Marvel. I don't just think it'll be a tool to get Holland into the Sony Spider-Verse, but I also think it could be the thing that brings Maguire and Garfield's Spider-Man into the MCU. I say this because if there's anything you could say about Kevin Feige, I think you'd say he swings for the fence. And he knows how important nostalgia is. And I think one of the most awesome things we could see on screen would be the team up of these 3 live-action Spider-Men. And Feige knows this. And keep in mind, this is just 10th level speculation, but I think Feige may be planning to unite the live action Spider-Man in an upcoming major Marvel film, say Secret Wars for example. I think the way this would play out is that Feige wouldn't even say they're officially the Spider-Man from the Garfield verse and the Maguire verse. Fans would be bright enough to connect the dots and know that they're the alternate reality versions of these characters that we've seen before on screen. It may seem like a long shot, and I'll admit it's very speculative, but there are 2 other major things that point me to this conclusion, and not just the multiverse of madness. The first reason is relationships. So as mentioned earlier, Disney and Marvel Studios and Kevin Feige, they haven't seen eye to eye with everyone that's worked with them, and people have left projects, but for the most part, Disney has established that they're willing to cultivate and nurture relationships between actors, and they're willing to bring in top talent, and that top talent could be Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield to fill in these roles. And the reason I mention this is because there was a very public falling out and kind of disagreement between Maguire, Sam Raimi, and Sony, and Garfield and Sony. Garfield especially has kind of gone on record, and it seems like he was very disappointed and very hurt by not being able to continue the Spider-Man franchise. And it seemed like he had a lot of passion for it, and you know that there might be some hurt feelings there between those parties. But with Disney, it's almost like it's a clean slate and they can try something new. Even though they are still working with Sony, Disney is in the lead here. And for the most part, even though it says Disney, Sony, based on everything we know, Kevin Feige is the one in charge and he's making the big calls. So I think based on if Disney and Marvel reached out to these actors and maybe try to build a relationship and foster a relationship with them, I think it's a stronger possibility that they would come back to work with Disney, Sony, rather than just Sony by themselves, if that makes sense. So I think that's one edge that Disney has in bringing back these 2 actors if they chose to. The other thing I think is the most recent Star Wars films that were released. I personally was deeply disappointed by The Force Awakens, and I completely hated The Last Jedi. And I haven't even been able to watch The Rise of Skywalker. But I know there are people who do like these films. Whichever side of the fence you fall, I think most fans would agree a lot of mistakes were made, particularly with the original cast and how they were kind of treated and didn't really get to interact and weren't really a big part of the story, I thought. So here's where Feige comes in. Feige is an intelligent guy and he's a self-proclaimed huge Star Wars fan. He's a major player at Disney. He's also a guy who seems to choose his words wisely and plays his cards close to the chest, so he was probably definitely following what was happening with the Star Wars franchise under Kathleen Kennedy, especially since he did sign on to work on a future Star Wars project. I think one of the lessons he might have taken away from seeing what kind of happened with Star Wars was the importance of nostalgia. Especially seeing beloved characters interacting with each other on screen. And I personally think he might apply this lesson to Spider-Man by joining the 3 Spider-Man on screen in a forthcoming film. So to sum it all up, do I think Garfield's Spider-Man will be the one to join Tom Hardy in Venom 2? Not as much as I did when I made that last video. A lot's changed since then. All evidence seems to be pointing to Marvel and Sony positioning itself for a potential crossover with Holland's MCU Spider-Man and Sony's Venom. But I now think there's actually a much better chance for us to see Maguire and Garfield's Spider-Man appearing in a forthcoming Disney-Sony film rather than just a Sony film, thanks to Disney's involvement. So one of the really cool things about that old video that I made is that it got a lot of positive comments. There's a lot of people who really want to see this. I honestly didn't think that there were so many people who really wanted Garfield back in the red and blue spandex to play Spidey again. And one of the really cool things about the previous video is getting to see the comments. I remember reading about Garfield kind of being upset how things went down, but I think if he was able to see, you know, like comments in the videos, and I think if he could see how much people really did like him, a lot of people really did like him as Spider-Man, I think, it might help him, might make him feel a little better about what happened with Spider-Man, because there were a lot of people who really loved his Spider-Man. And I personally feel that I would like to see Garfield's Spider-Man joining Tom Hardy in Venom 2. I mean, I made a video about it and we're talking about it here. Now that things have changed and now that I feel that that's less likely to happen, I hope that this doesn't, really disappoint people, just because I can understand, where you're coming from, that you really want this, and it seems so much less likely now than back when I made the video, and I've come to realize that too. But hopefully there's still some sort of glimmer of hope. I do personally really think Disney might have a hand in making something like this happen, and I really hope they do. But if this were to happen, I don't expect it to happen for a very long time. And if they do, I think Disney Marvel's going to be hush-hush about it. So I guess all we have to do is wait and see what happens. And whatever happens, Holland's amazing, Garfield's amazing, Maguire's amazing. And I really look forward to seeing what's in store for these actors on their future roles. So hopefully, Carniel, this video's answered your questions, and to everybody else who wanted this follow-up video, hopefully it's kind of helped a little bit. But again, these are just opinions. I have no facts. I have nothing other than speculation on what I think might happen. So don't take this as any sort of gospel or anything like that. This is a very speculative video. It's just my opinion on stuff. So I'd like to know, what do you all think after watching this? I know some of the things I proposed are incredibly ambitious, but the unfortunate thing about movies is that sequels have to one-up each other. And I think one major way this could be done would be including the 3 live-action Spider-Man standing shoulder to shoulder in an upcoming film. But what do you all think? Is this just way too crazy? Or do you feel this could be what Feige has in store for us in the future? Let me know in the comment section. And if you have questions or video requests, let me know in the comment section, and I'll do my best to make them as soon as possible. Thank you all for watching. Subscribe for more comic book content. Leave a like if you liked the video. Share it if you loved it. And as always, thank you so much for watching. And on a final note, I made this video before learning of the tragic passing of Chadwick Boseman. So I just wanted to say a little something. I think he meant so much to so many people, and I hope he knew that before he passed. I read that he was secretly dealing with this illness for years, and yet he did so much to help others, and he always put on a brave face. I would say, if possible, try to extend kindness to others, show empathy to others. We don't know what internal battles people are fighting, and I think kindness goes a long way. So take care, everyone, and rest in peace, Mr. Boseman.